Hey.
Look at all of those excited faces. Everyone's so excited. Ready to face some fears. You all look terrified. I'm not going to lie, everybody. I'm guessing it's been a big 24 hours for everyone then. Yeah. So this is a very interesting thing about transformation, right? All transformation requires is our attention. And as soon as we start to put our focus into a particular direction and area, all of a sudden, if by some universal magic, all of the things that you've been avoiding relating to the transformation start to show up in your life. Are you relating to that? Anybody? Just show hands. Okay. Yeah. Cool. And I hope that if you're jumping on to day 2 of the challenge, welcome to day 2. You have watched the replay that has been day 1. It's very important that you learn each of these steps sequentially. Yesterday was education. We had Dr. K, amazing neuroscientist, explaining what fear actually is on a neurological level, where it comes from in our evolutionary journey and why it's important. And let's just recap and all take a moment to just be really grateful for our fear, because our fear is the thing that gives us this experience of perceived separation. Isn't that cool? That I get to be Nicole and Anthea gets to be Anthea and Kate gets to be Kate because of our fear, this construct that we have around our egos. And this is the concept that we're going to be diving into in day 2, is this understanding that fear is the thing that really gives us this sensory experience through constructing our identity. And identity is something that can be absolutely remarkable when we understand that, just like seasons, identities are meant to shift and change. And another show of hands, those of you that know you've identified with identities, with belief systems, limited belief systems, relationships, past their use by date, to the point that these identities have stopped actually serving you and they've actually started to limit you. Does anyone relate to that? Cool. On the same page. And this is what I saw so much in mental health, is that actually, you know, so much of mental health challenges in human beings actually came from this inability to let go of the things that we really need to let go of. And the more your capacity to let go, which is this ability to transcend the self, to lean into fears, the more we're able to continually create identities that really serve us and hold us in our evolution. So there are some key symptoms of fear that I noticed through all of this journey and working with many different people, which truly is the biggest privilege of the work that I do, is just the amount of humanity I get to be exposed to. And through that exposure, seeing patterns over and over and over again. And what I started to become really curious about is, well, if love is our true nature, which it is, you know, the loving force of life, of humanity, of all of existence, is the truth beneath all of the restrictions. There's a unity consciousness that's binding all of us. So why don't we have access to that? What is the difference between someone that is living from this place of love and someone who's totally confined in fear? And what is the difference between an individual that knows how to actually leverage their fear, just like Dr. K was speaking about with us yesterday, and actually use that energy to propel us towards our evolution? And I started to notice these patterns. And these patterns is the thing that I want to share with you guys, because this is going to help the day 2 theme, which is identification. It's going to help you actually identify where your fears might be playing out in your life. And I want to take a little moment actually to congratulate all of you, give yourself a round of applause for all of your brave sharing on live. Some of you had really big fears around sharing on the live, and that's a pretty amazing thing, to not just share on a live video when you're not used to speaking in front of camera, but to actually share about something that's really vulnerable, really real, that's leaning into your edges, that's allowing you to expand as a human being, and also, to give permission to other people. We've had numerous tribe members reach out wanting to do the challenge, even though they didn't initially commit to the challenge. And that's simply because you have, shown them that it's okay to do that, and that actually you're extremely lovable when you lean into to these, aspects of ourselves that we can so intensely judge. My co-host today is also Anthea. Everyone say hey, Anthea. Anthea is going to be talking us through, again, so many years of research in about 10 minutes condensed down, that's going to teach you some of the somatics behind fear, because in the next 24 hours, get ready, you're actually going to be actioning the fear after you go through this call and you identify how fear is playing out in your life specifically. I noticed in some of your reflections, you were commenting that wow, I've never thought about fear in its kind of what are all of the layers of fear that play out in my life, and not just I think Kate's example in her reflection was, once upon a time, her assumption of fear was if I was walking down a dark alleyway at night and I was afraid, and that's how I saw fear. And now I understand that fear is everything that's preventing me from being the truest, authentic, most expressed, unedited, raw, creative version of myself. And so this list that I'm about to take you through is going to help you decipher the difference between a love-based state and love-based thinking, and fear-based states and fear-based thinking. So if you want to take notes, you can, but we'll also be sure to email you through this model. It was actually already emailed to you in the preliminary email, but this is the best way that you guys are going to identify exactly how fear is currently playing out in your life. I'm actually going to start by talking you through the symptoms of love, because it's going to be a beautiful contrast and something to look forward to. Just remembering that as you lean into the edges of fear, your capacity for love increases. So on the other side of facing these fears, this is what you have to look forward to. Again, this model came from observing hundreds of thousands of people and noticing the differences through my own curiosity between someone who is in a love-based state and someone who is in a fear-based state, and what it did to their thinking specifically. In a love-based state, what I noticed people being able to do is they were thinking more expansively. So they were able to think in a way that was more divergent. They were able to be more inclusive. So in their presence, people felt like there was a deeper ability to connect with them. They weren't on guard. They were actually in a mindset in a group of friends, for example, or individuals. There was a mindset of wanting to include everyone, irrespective of differences. They were actually more creative. So if you think about, I think the traditional way that we look at love, which is often romantic, thanks to Walt Disney, we think that, when you're falling in love, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but it sort of feels like there's infinite possibility. You can bring the stars to earth, you can move mountains. That someone falling in love really is perceived as a crazy person by people on the outside. Well, there's actually a reason, there's an explanation as to why love is connecting you to such a source of limitlessness. Love is a state that allows us to transcend the parameters of time and space. Truly, this is why we can love someone who's passed away. This is why we can fall in love with something that hasn't even happened yet, like the visions that we have for our future. It's this transcendental state that we can access, that remembering that human nature truly is limitless. The only thing finite about our existence is time. Everything else is limitless, and this is what love is connecting you to. So people who were coming from a state of love were naturally more creative. They were able to think of ideas that were more revolutionary. They were able to draw parallels together that were further apart, like true creative thinkers. They were more solution focused. So when they were presented with challenges, they weren't seeing these challenges as deterrents. They were actually seeing these challenges as an opportunity for growth, something to lean into, which is really fascinating. We used the example of the vision yesterday. And when you start to state a vision and how that vision informs you, but also makes you really aware of all of the fear, all of the parts of you that need to expand to become the condition to actually live and breathe that vision to become someone who's big enough to live the life that you're wanting to live, there's shifts that need to happen, fears that need to be worked through. Well, this solution-focused mindset is the difference between when you make a statement like, this is the life I want to live beyond fear, this is what it means for me to live fearlessly, and the universe starts to push against you with this resistance. It's the difference between looking at that resistance and saying, oh, clearly I'm not meant to, actualize my potential. Clearly this is not the right thing for me to be doing. It's a difference between that and being able to look at it and actually say, wow, this is my opportunity to lean into this resistance and become and expand my capacity for love. That actually the universe is putting this in my path to make me bigger, to make me better, to make me stronger, to make me more capable. People who are in a state of love I found to be incredibly compassionate. So the difference is there between, compassion and say even empathy is compassion is the ability to witness someone's experience but not actually get trapped within the emotions that they're going through. So you're able to hold a higher ground. I write this in Love Out Loud as love is the bird's eye view. Love's really connecting you to an ultimate perspective. We think about terms like time is a healer. Time is not a healer. What is a healer is perspective. And a lot of the time it's, time that brings that perspective. But through the practice of this state of love, what you're able to do is actually access a broader perspective almost instantaneously, the fitter you get for love, quite literally. The last quality was altruism. So the ability to think altruistically, the ability to really believe that, our evolution as a species isn't doomed, that there's good in humanity, that there are infinite possibilities, that just because we are being met with, problems and challenges in our world, that actually if we were to reach a state of wholeness and unity and love, that there would be solutions that would become clear to us. There would be a pathway out of this, out of the trap that fear can sometimes create. So that's everything that you have to look forward to. You're going to get closer to those qualities of being the more you start to identify where these things are playing out in your life. And these were the symptoms of fear that were the most prevalent. And as I talk you through these, I want you to, if you have a journal in front of you, it would be a good idea to write these down and start to just write some notes about what immediately comes to mind about your own areas of life where this might be playing out. So people in a fear-based state, the first very prevalent symptom was contraction and rigidity. So they were rigid in their thinking. They weren't able to be flexible. The kind of symptom that, like, if you change a plan, it would be really hard for them to be flexible and fluid with that. They would, assign a lot of meaning to that. They would allow those situations to actually impact their state of being. They were restrictive. So this is a sort of mindset of like, I will only go out for half an hour because I don't want to have too much fun. I'm not going to have too much pleasure. So the habit of believing that there is a limit and a restriction to the amount in which we can experience life. Another example would be, I can only scale my business 5 or 10% because, that's the normal amount. I can't actually dream beyond that. And again, going back to the love-based state, it's the ability to dream limitlessly. It's the ability to dream without a ceiling. So if there's areas of your life that you're actually being extremely restrictive and conservative, this is actually a symptom of fear. And we've got to get to the bottom of that. What is the fear underneath this? What are the belief systems that you're holding on to, the limitations that are preventing you from dreaming beyond that ceiling, dreaming limitlessly? The other symptom was reactive. People were who were in a fear-based state were reactive. So there's two ways that you can respond in moments, obviously love or fear, but that could otherwise be defined by a reaction or a response. And the beauty about becoming more responsive, which is a more loving approach to a moment, is you actually remain within your own empowerment when you respond, and it becomes a conscious decision of how you want to navigate a situation. But if you have triggers that result in you being extremely reactive, what this means is you're giving all of your power away to the people in your stratosphere. When you're reacting to a partner when they do the wrong thing, when you're reacting to friends, when you're reacting to your parents, when you're reacting to your kids. Are there any parents on this call? Just show of hands. Okay, so this is a little bit of behavioral psychology. You know, the more that we react, the more we actually hand our power over to the individuals that we're trying to influence. Facilitation is a beautiful teacher for me in this, in noticing the more I can remain calm and be responsive with my participants, the more influence I have over the group. But if my triggers are getting in the way because of my own fears, my own inadequacies, my own insecurities, all of a sudden I've lost the ability to influence the group. This is very true in life and our relationships, and also with ourselves. So if you're walking into a situation, this is maybe a relatable example, and your reaction is to feel insecure, you know, because you've reacted so quickly. Even though you might not have reacted externally, that reaction has consumed you. You've lost the ability to remain calm and be responsive in the moment. And then you'll feel like that insecurity is completely overriding your experience. And it's going to be a very difficult thing once that reaction has taken place and taken a hold of you to shake that and to come back into a state of love. So it's really the practice of understanding where our reactions lie, and then being able to approach that gently and build our capacity over time. The other symptom was judgmentalness. So people who were in a state of fear were either very self-critical or very judgmental of others, really understanding through the enlightened mind that it's the same. You know, what we judge in others is a mirror of ourselves. And sometimes that can be really hard to look at. You know, truth is going to set you free, but it's going to hurt like a bitch first a lot of the time. And what you are judging in others is very much something for you to look at. And when you can start to navigate this through love, the questions you'll start to ask is, what is this judgment that I have of this other person trying to show me? This is actually an invitation for me to lean into my own evolution. So judgment is a very big thing. What do you have judgment around? This includes, like, do you have judgment around people's success? Do you have judgment around people's aesthetic or style? You know, are you trying to find a romantic partner, but you really struggle because you're finding yourself very judgmental and nitpicky about things that actually in the long run might not actually, you know, matter? These judgments that are keeping us separate from what could be a very expansive experience, because we're not even giving it a chance, because we're judging it on face value. When it comes to success, if there's people in your life, I facilitated a guy last week in Costa Rica who asked me a question about, you know, what my opinion was around people in positions of power and authority. And it was very evident that he was extremely judgmental and triggered around power. And I was very confrontational with him. And I said, you need to heal your relationship with authority, because what this is triggering in you is your own inadequacies. So in order to compensate for your feeling of inadequacy, you're hating people that you perceive to be powerful. And that's actually just perpetuating your cycle. And for him, that was a really big moment of transformation, and just an insight into how our judgments can sometimes keep us extremely limited and prevent us from actually, you know, going inside, insourcing, and discovering what the truth of that is for us. So the other things were narrow thinking, selfishness, but I also want to add to that self-orientation, because it's not always, you know, we don't always intend to act selfishly when we're in a state of fear, but because of the evolutionary realities of fear, as explained to us yesterday, there's no space. Like, your prefrontal cortex is actually shut down, so there's no space to think. And the prefrontal cortex, just by the way, for humans, is what is responsible for altruistic thinking, for ethical thinking. The fact that we can even contemplate morals as a human being is because of that development of our brain. And because when you're in a state of fear, your prefrontal cortex is actually completely shut down, you're not able to think about others in a compassionate way. You're not able to think in an altruistic way. So a lot of this isn't, intentionally selfish, but it can be self-orientation. Tony Robbins puts it very well when he says, all of our suffering exists in the self. When we focus too much on the self, when we make ourselves too significant, and this isn't just when we make ourselves superior, this is actually when we make ourselves inferior, which is the spectrum of the ego. Inferiority and superiority is actually a manifestation of the same thing. Someone who has issues with grandeur is actually really they're not really coming from a different place than someone who's coming from a deep place of inadequacy and insecurity. So when we give this too much time, when we make these aspects of us so significant, it can be very difficult to transcend our fears. And the last one was limited in perspective, so not able to access a higher perspective. So think about situations in your life that maybe you feel like, again and again and again, it just feels like the same shit, different day. You're not able to access a solution outside of these confines that fear is creating in your life. Maybe it will feel like you're just on a never-ending merry-go-round and you're starting to feel insane, like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome. This is an insight. This is a key point of awareness that is going to be showing you where fear might be residing inside of you. So that's the model that's going to help you, part one of this call, identify where some of these fears might be playing out, where some of these ego constructs, where elements of identity that are no longer serving you are in you, both consciously and subconsciously. So I'm going to hand it over to Anthea now, who's going to expand on this through explaining the somatics and also, just the other. I don't even need to introduce Anthea. She's so charismatic and amazing, and her voice is so great that she's just going to really introduce herself. I love you, Anthea.
Hi, Nick. Hey, guys. Oh, you are such a wealth of information, and Nick's driven it home that fear is about perspective. And what I wanted to really share with you guys today is how to actually feel that fear in your body. So Dr. K yesterday talked about the neurology and how that actually comes on and how it affects our behavior. And the quickest way we can actually move out of the fear state is actually by moving our body or shifting our posture and our position. And so I just want to talk you guys through what fear physically feels and looks like. So for contraction is the first physical expression of fear. So if we think anger, we're all going to go to our fists, right? Put your fists up for me if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Beautiful. And I just want you to actually feel how your body feels and how you feel emotionally when you've got your fists up in the air and you've got them clenched, right? And check out Sarah. She's even got her teeth clenched. You're so embodied. Your body knows exactly where you're going with that emotion, right? But so simple, like feel that. Feel how your body feels just with your fists clenched. We know that that's an angry feeling. And so when we see somebody with their fists clenched, our brain instinctually will decide prospectively that that's an angry person. The other feelings of fear in our body will be making ourselves either really, really small, again, contraction, or really, really big, depending on where our ego is on the inferiority, superiority spectrum. So I just want you to feel, if you just put your arms out really wide, I just want you to feel how that feels in your body. If you're so open, but you actually don't have the confidence in your body to be so wide open, I want you to feel what that actually feels for you. Right? It feels vulnerable. It feels exposed. Right? Can everybody nod your head if you're hearing me and you're agreeing? Yep. Awesome. Awesome. And so now I want you to cross your hands across your body like this and just squeeze yourself really tight, but on your shoulders. And I just want you to see how that feels in your body. And I love this because the body is so intuitive. Again, Sarah, who does embodiment, is doing it naturally. When we're in a state of anxiety, we will naturally going into self-soothing poses. So we will rock. Rocking is a self-soothing mechanism on the body that brings our parasympathetic nervous system back into alignment. So when we're stressed, i.e. contracted state like this, for example, we will naturally go into a rocking motion to realign ourselves. So the reason why I just wanted to share these little exercises with you is when you guys identify your fear, when you think of the thing that you will be committing to and leaning into, your body is going to have a reaction. You might not even know what it is you're afraid of, but your body will. It will know that and it will respond to that. Does that make sense to you guys? Awesome. So I just wanted to sort of wrap that up with just giving you guys a basic understanding of how that works and why. Scott, who yesterday asked a question that we didn't get around to answering, which was about the amygdala. And the amygdala is a part of our brain, in fact, a part of our brain stem that actually is responsible for how we respond to fear or how we respond to our emotional stimuli or stimuli in our environment. And the first thing the amygdala does is bring our awareness to what we're perceiving. So like Nick was saying, perspective, okay? And what the amygdala does is create context. So say, for example, we go back to our angry fists. We're not angry, we're not frightened in this moment because we have the context that you guys are on a live, you're learning new things. It's actually really safe. So I can have my fists up ready to punch you guys and it's just no response. Why? Because the amygdala recognizes the context, right? Does that make sense, guys? So what I want you to understand is when you identify your fears, the way you're going to actually navigate that space between the fear and the old identity, as Nick said, when you identify yourself in the fear-based story, fear-based behavior, belief, whatever it might be, the way you overcome that is by looking at the context first. And the next step you can take towards your new identity. Does that make sense, guys?
Yes.
Awesome. So just one last thing I want to add to that is that, first of all, any fear that you conquer at any point in time, because naturally the body goes into a contracted state, it's going to be tight, right? It's going to be tight. Therefore, when you've actually, and the tightness stays, the contraction stays whilst you're prevaricating, deciding, procrastinating, avoiding, resisting, we're in this contraction state. So the minute you actually leap in and lean into that fear, you're back into expansion. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, you're still going to feel good. I just really want you guys to once again get back into the fist state, and I want you to hold it for as long as you can, for as tight as you can. And I just want you to feel this, your hands in clenched fists is fear right now that you're holding on to, that you're avoiding, that you're resisting, that you're judging, that you're thinking very inflexibly and completely uncreatively about. These is your clenched fist, and I want you to just hold it and feel just how awkward it is to just be doing this for like even this long, right? My ego's like, Anthea, this is silly. Get them to stop. But I want you to now slowly release that. Just slowly release that. Just slowly release your clenched fists. Feel it. Just feel the relief. Just feel the relief, okay? We're just talking hands. It's just our hands. And that's what's happening to our body. So imagine when you actually jump in and lean into your fear that you've been avoiding and resisting. And that fear, and it can be how small, hey, Billy, however small that is, however small that fear is, it still has the same biophysiological response on your body, okay? So whether you want to go climb Mount Everest or you just need to like call your boyfriend and say, sorry, no thank you, it's going to have the same response. Yeah, that's what I want to share. Does that make sense, guys?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
you're so amazing. You should definitely all come to our trainings and retreats and just milk Anthea for all of her years of knowledge, because it's just like, it's an endless. We were geeking out on Google Docs before, like writing all of the content that we want to create for everyone. It's just like endless. I've never met someone as like who geeks out on this stuff as much as I do. It's pretty real. But you know why this is so, you know, necessary and important to understand as you lean into your fear, because as we discussed yesterday, there's only 2 reasons why we don't lean into our fears, and it's we don't have the awareness. So this is giving you awareness. Number 1 is giving you awareness of like, where am I contracted? And we don't, when we've only ever lived in a contracted way, sometimes we don't even realize, we don't even think. Like, we're meant to be nimble, we're meant to be agile, we're meant to feel good, we're meant to be fluid as a human being. Like, look at how a child expresses. This is how we're meant to express. When you look at, you know, the baby boomer generation or the generation above them, for the most part, like even their dress sense, like when you think about even just their dress sense, a lot of the time, and I could be a little bit jaded because I worked in government for a long period of time, is very rigid. Like it's void of the ability to be fluid and to move, which is our natural state. It's like nature. We're meant to be fluid and to move. So by understanding the somatics of this, I want you to start to notice where you're holding on to tension in your body, because the root of this is going to be fear. The only reason we hold on is because we're afraid. Yeah. Literally. When you're in a state of love, it's a selfless, like when I say transcend the self, what I mean is transcend these limitations of the self. We're actually like, we're activated, we're fully turned on. Literally, you are turned on by life. Life in essence can truly be a completely orgasmic experience. Like life is actually one massive orgasm. It is just like one orgasm that is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more expansive, and we're a part of that. This is how we can be experiencing life, and this elation is what you guys have to look forward to on the other side of leaning into these fears. Systematically noticing these things. It's not just a cognitive thing. Yeah. You know, we're holding on to these fears in our identities, and then we identify with the rigidity, you know, and we tell a story around the rigidity. You know, well, I just have to be like this or like this or like that. I have to show up like this. I have to talk like this, when it's not actually real for you. That's not what's authentic. That's not what is love for you in that moment. And when we identify with that, it gets even more difficult to transcend those fears, because identity is a very tricky thing. You know, when we start to identify with things, it can become very difficult for us to even notice how these identities are limiting us. Why? Because when we identify with something, guess what? Everyone else in our life starts to identify us as that thing. So unless you're around very conscious people, very rarely are these identities going to be challenged, you know? So that's why we need to be in a constant practice of relinquishing identity. Like my greatest wish for all of you is that you can literally die to yourself every single second, every single breath, because that is true liberation. Let's just start by facing like a couple of fears first, but know that the journey, the path of this is really the ability to relinquish the self every single day so that you can show up in the infinite potentiality that you are. As Anthea and I were geeking out on just before, you know, there are things that you know, there are things that you know that you don't know, aka can't fly a plane. I know that I don't know that. And that's like 5% of our consciousness. Things I know how to type. Things I know I don't know how to fly a plane. The other 95%, guess what, is things that you don't know that you don't know. And you know how you meet that infinite potential inside of you is to lean into your edges, the identity constructs, the fears that are actually preventing you from meeting the aspects of you that are very real. These aspects of you are very real. Just because your identity isn't allowing you to see these things right now doesn't mean that that's not an aspect of your potentiality. Even identities like, I'm only a writer, you know, I only work in finance, I'm only a mother. You know, when we start to identify as only these things, this is an aspect of you, yes. But is it the definitive? Is it the only thing that you are? Of course not. You can be anything you want to be.
Yeah, can I just say, with regards to death, so the body, when we do something new, we're having to create a new neurological pathway, and so the body actually literally thinks that it's dying, because the cells to create this new behavior and get rid of the old one has to actually die. So that is a process of death in the body. But interestingly, honey, in French, the term for orgasm is known as la petite mort, which means the little death.
I know.
And another thing in relation to that is our arousal response to fear is the same arousal response in the plateau to our sexual arousal response as well. So the two of facing our fears and our sexual expression and our ability to be creative and you know, with regards to rigidity and flexibility and expansiveness, etc., it's all very, very interrelated. In orgonomy, when we are able to let go, so in somatics, it's actually called holding patterns in the body. When I'm assessing, I'm looking at where are you holding yourself and what does that relate to physically and emotionally. But to actually, if you were actually open, if we were all completely open, we'd be what would be known as a vegetative state. We would literally be like babies with our feet in our mouth, you know,
having a great time.
Hands, being really very open to exploring our environment in the ways that babies do. And so I actually experimented on this to see if this is actually, it's very real. You can do that. And everyone should actually just try being a baby for like 5 minutes and seeing how that feels. Like it's really good practice. It really is. Point being, when we're in that open, flexible, vegetative state with our intellect intact and our emotions grounded, we can make really amazing choices for ourselves and live really limitlessly. And that's what it is to be orgasmic in that sense. Yeah.
Yes. So let's ground this in. Anthea is too cute. I know. It's ridiculous. It's like 98% the accent, I swear. So grounding this in, there's going to be some reflection that you've got to do over the next 24 hours, because tomorrow is when you guys state and commit to overcoming your fear. So after our call tomorrow, you're going to have 24 hours to actually either action the fear or at the very least commit to the action of fear. So the only instance where you wouldn't be directly confronting your fear would be something like a skydive, because it might be difficult to go and skydive within the next 24 hours. But what you're going to be asked to do is call and pay for that skydive. So after tomorrow's call, you're going to actually be confronting the expansion of yourself. You're going to be stretching the limitations of your identity, and you're going to be recreating yourself on literally a cellular level, which is pretty cool. Like we said yesterday, lots of people think it takes 10 years to change. It doesn't. It literally takes a moment to change. And this is what you guys are going to experience. And once you go through the entirety of this challenge, this is a process that you can replicate again and again and again on every single challenge. You know, you've got the education now. Go back to the identification. Where's there more area of you that you can expand into love? And then the action. This is so much of development misses the actual action. People will sit in audiences again and again and again. They'll read all the books, they'll read all the theory, but they're not actually taking the action. And it's the only thing that a teacher can't do for you. You have to take the action. You have to experience somatically the expansion that comes with taking the action. I noticed a few of you commented on rejection. You know, as being one of the biggest fears, and rejection is one of the biggest human fears. This is why public speaking is the most feared thing. It's more feared than death. You know, the best way to deal with rejection is to be rejected, and to realize that on the other side of that, you're still alive, you know, and the practice of experiencing this enough times, or at least taking the risk and potentially getting rejected. Every time I step on stage, I risk rejection, especially with the loony things that I speak about. Honestly, like, there's a high chance that I'm going to be rejected a lot of the time, but because I'm so willing to be rejected, well, it doesn't actually come up for me that much, because I'm like so okay with it. So I don't really, the universe isn't giving me that lesson anymore. The universe is going to give you that lesson because it's an edge for you. So the more comfortable you get in these edges of your fears, the less it's going to show up for you. That's why it's so amazing. You know, I was a lot more scared of heights before I skydived. I was a lot more scared of heights before I bungee jumped. I'm still afraid. It's still an edge for me. But because I've trained myself to know that I can fall from the sky at velocity and still be alive, I'm less afraid. You know, it's taken the element of the unknown away. And this is something that only the action can teach you. Only through the action will the unfamiliar, the unknown, become more familiar. You'll become more comfortable with that. And this is what starts to eradicate fear from your life, is that ability to be fluid, flexible, agile in life and not restricted and confined. Does that make sense? So you're going to go back through every one of those symptoms of fear. We'll email it to you in the replay video as well, so you have it once again. And you're going to start to really take some time to think about the areas of your life where these symptoms are present. And you're going to think about what is the biggest opportunity, which you've already reflected on, for me to truly grow on a cognitive, emotional, physiological, and spiritual level through this challenge. Because there's a beautiful part of this, which is we're doing this as a community. You know, there's many of us in different time zones that are watching the replay, so who aren't live on this call, but they're doing it with us. And there's this momentum of community support, which really does create accountability. And there's a lot to be said for doing things together. There's a real power in that. So my challenge to you guys, as you go through and you identify the exact areas where this fear is present in your life, and choosing the bold action that you want to take in the next 24 hours, I don't want you to play small. I want you to go for the biggest fear that you can identify in your life, because I promise you there is no better time than now to be doing it. You've literally been equipped with everything that you need for success. And as Anthea said, the more you hesitate, guess what? The worse it becomes. So if there's something at the forefront of your mind, even now, that's coming through, and your subconscious mind is like, that is the fear, that is the conversation I have to have, that is the commitment I have to make, that is the action I have to take, this is where I need to risk rejection. I can see some of you freaking the fuck out. It is okay. You are loved. You are going to survive this. On the other side of facing this fear, you are literally going to become more of yourself. You have nothing to lose. Literally, fear, the only thing to fear is fear itself. As soon as you take the jump off that edge, guess what? It's a feather bed. Because when you muster the courage and you lean into the fear goes away. Fear literally, it needs to be faced head on. When you face it head on, it goes away. We think the fear is telling us that the scariest thing is what happens after we take the action. But that's not true. The scariest part of fear is right before you take the action. And so these areas of complacency in your life, you're actually already in the scariest bit. It doesn't get scarier than this. So every action you take after this, you just become more expansive. You just become more elated. You just become more flexible and fluid as a human being. You just start to extend the parameters of your identity and start to identify with more of who you are. So that's the good news. So that's step one of your homework, is to go through those symptoms. We'll email them to you again and really think about where is the biggest edge for you and what is the action that is required of you to become that fullest expression. And the second is a visualization exercise, which I highly recommend you doing tonight if you're in Australia. Don't do it tonight if you're in LA, because you need to go to bed after this call. Mostly just speaking to myself. The visualization is, I want you to drop in to the moment after you've confronted this fear. And like we talked about yesterday, rather than rehearsing the worst case scenario, rehearsing the best case scenario, the visceral feeling of how you will be, what you would have proven to yourself, you know, actually having made the impossible possible. How is that actually going to feel in your body? I want you to visualize that as your future self. And if you really need that extra support, that extra gentle guidance, what you can do, and this is a technique that I use in my visualizations, when you're imagining that future version of yourself, you can actually invite your present self into a conversation with them. And I want you to ask the wisdom of that future self, which is already expanded through the fear, to guide you in telling you what you need to hear to find and muster the courage to take that action. It's a very, very powerful thing. It sounds very simple, but it's very powerful. So first, connect to that future version of yourself, that fearless version of yourself, the one that's already taken the action. And if you still need that encouragement and that support, invite that future self to have a conversation with your present moment self and ask them for the guidance, ask them for the wisdom that you need to hear. And of course, share your reflections on a live in the group. Also on Instagram, if you want to, make sure you tag us and we can reshare that for you. It really is a beautiful part of this challenge, the more we can share, because there are some people that are so contracted that even making the commitment and the decision to be on these calls is still, you know, so out of their capacity. But what you guys sharing and opening up this conversation and people seeing anyone from all walks of life has the potential to live fearlessly, it gives them permission, which is why the sharing is such a core component of this challenge. So yeah, that's your last piece of homework, is doing a live reflection. Perhaps once you've identified these symptoms of fear in your life, reflecting on that in the group, and even your experience of the visualization, if that is something that you feel to share as well. In summary, I'm so proud of you all. I'm very excited for tomorrow. Very excited to hear. You're all going to be stating your actions on the Zoom call tomorrow, just FYI, so that we're holding each other accountable. If there's someone you know that is doing this challenge who you want to ask to be your accountability buddy, I highly recommend that as well. Someone that you can call, you know, right before if you need those extra words of support. That's what this community is about, is reaching in and understanding that we're in this together, that we're sharing this beautiful present moment together, and that, you know, your win is my win ultimately. And when you don't choose you're actually detracting from all of our evolution. No pressure. But truly, you know, when you're not choosing your own expansion, you have to wear the responsibility of all of humanity, truly. That's the ultimate freedom when you realize that, though, because you're like, oh, well, I just have to keep transcending the self because there's a reason bigger than me. It's a beautiful thing when you really start to live in that way. So I love you guys. Again, if there's anything else that you want to learn about Love Out Loud, if you're new to the community, please go to our URL. I just put it in the box. Also, Kate, are you able to put Sarah's Calendly link in there? As I said yesterday, if you're more someone that loves to converse and ask questions over the phone, and you want to understand some of the events that we have coming up all over the world, give Sarah a call. You can use this Calendly link to book a phone call straight away. Maybe start to pre-qualify yourself by thinking, you know, who do I want to become as a result of stepping into these spaces and doing this deeper transformation work. Kate, are you okay to put the link?
Yeah, I'm just grabbing it now.
Just grabbing it, cool. Sarah, if you just want to give everyone a wave so they know your face. Sarah's here for you guys to answer any questions that you have about any of our work. Love you guys. I'll see you all in the Facebook group. If you're not in the Facebook group, here is here's what you search on Facebook to jump in the group. Please make sure you do. And I will see you all tomorrow.
I love you.
We love you.
That was incredible, Nick. Thank you.